Welcome to the Insurance Brokers Podcast, Helpful Hints. Here we break down the best, most informative bits of our full-length interviews.
One of the things that I did a long time ago now, probably a year or so, maybe even more, I did a podcast interview with Peter Cullen.
All right.
And one of the things that Peter said was, and I can't remember exactly the dates, but I think he was sort of saying by 2030, 2040, the big players in our market are going to be Amazon and Google. And that's because everything is going algorithm based, and there's a massive amount of money being pumped into that sort of the technical side now. What I find interesting is, and I'm seeing it more and more, and Peter did reference a Chinese company that's in a book called The Second Curve by Charles Handy. I would highly recommend. And what he was talking about is the way the whole world is changing, and how it's not enough to do what you've always done because you're not going to get what you've always got. That's no longer the case, because what we've done in the last few years, particularly the last 12 months, is such a massive 180 that we need to start thinking differently. So it's almost the entire business strategy for intermediaries. And I'm not saying brokers, I'm thinking, other intermediaries, across industries need to be thinking about a more cohesive approach, what forces they can join up with and how. And I think it's so interesting to watch what's going to play out over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, so I think that's the interesting bit. So Peter's view in terms of that time horizon is the next kind of 25 to 50 years, right? In terms of that massive change, which I think is right. I think there is going to be a shift. I think that what we will see is that we all know that we've got certain customer types that genuinely have more straightforward business operations than others. That doesn't mean they're bigger or smaller, they're just less complicated and less risk. And they do lend themselves, as we've seen with Actress over the last 10 years, right? They lend themselves to a simpler transaction-based kind of engagement, which really lends itself to our industry in terms of that more algorithmic, digital-based approach. So I can definitely see there being a trend to online management of a large number of SMEs in the UK by intermediaries and providers alike. I think there's always going to be a space for the more complex customers that have got more diverse businesses that desperately need the advice that insurance brokers can provide, the risk support they can give, and then lending itself to a wider kind of support vehicle. That doesn't mean the other ones are not going to need support. They're just going to need content and direction given to them in a different way. So I do think that there will be a divergence of the way that the customer is managed based on their complexity. We've seen that in other industries.
Absolutely. And the more complex business arrangements that are requiring, the sort of relationship-based support, by default need the full cohesive package.
Yeah.
So by sort of the next level up from what we're saying is, again, plays into buying behaviors and selling cycles and all of these good things. The stickiness of a customer is so super important, particularly given the way things are changing. So the more ways in which you have contact points, giving advice, and are sort of in bed with that business, the more stickier they're going to be, which is just a common sense perspective, but everybody says it. But what does it mean, and how, as the broker, do you make that happen? How do you do it in a way that is within your business culture, to everybody? Because often you come across, this kind of circumstance whereby you've got the account exec who are absolutely, excuse my French, shit hot on, commercial business risk. But actually, if you need them to speak about the legal implications, they lose confidence. So it's almost a difficult thing to do, but it is certainly worth putting the time in to make that happen.
I completely agree. It's interesting that you talk about putting the time in for stickiness, because I think that's right. But, crikey, in the last 3.5 years that I've been in the market, I've talked to lots and lots of brokers. All of them tell me about how new business is so important to them, right? I'm not seeing huge swathes of new business switching between brokers at a rate that would say that there is a competitive environment for that. So, the reality is that if you're going to talk to your customers and add value to them in order to keep them, you can also do that to get them off someone else.